The phone rang at 5:47 in the morning. Victoria Okoye knew before she answered it. She always knew. The knowing lived somewhere below her ribs, a cold, familiar weight that preceded every call from Lagos, every message from Toronto, every overdue notice slid under her apartment door in Seoul. She picked up on the second ring. "Miss Okoye." The doctor's voice was professional, carefully neutral. "Your mother's dialysis is scheduled for tomorrow. Without the outstanding payment, we cannot proceed." In the background, faint and rhythmic, she could hear it, the slow beeping of the dialysis machine, each pulse steady, patient, indifferent to everything it cost. She pressed her thumb into the corner of her eye. "How much time do I have?" "Until 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, Lagos time." She did the math. 14 hours. Her interview was in less than 1. "I understand," she said. "I'll handle it." She hung up and sat on the edge of her bed, the narrow one with the broken slat she'd reinforced with a textbook, and looked at her room. 3 years of scholarship documents pinned above her desk. A single photograph of her mother, round-faced and laughing, taped to the mirror. A stack of envelopes she couldn't afford to open. Her phone buzzed. Tunde. "Sis, tuition portal closes at midnight. They said last warning." She typed back, "I know, don't worry." She stared at the words, "don't worry," the 2 most expensive words she'd ever spoken. She stood up. Incheon Airport was already thundering with the morning rush when Victoria arrived, her blazer slightly crooked, her resume folder clutched to her chest. She'd taken the bus, couldn't justify the subway fare on top of everything else, and the traffic had stolen 23 minutes she didn't have. She checked her wallet inside a bathroom stall. 2 bills, a crumpled receipt from the pharmacy. Behind it, almost hidden, was the hospital invoice. Partial payment, balance outstanding, red stamp across the corner that read "overdue" in English and Korean both, as if the shame needed translation. She folded everything back and pressed her palm flat against the stall door. Just let today work. She said it like a prayer. She said it like a threat. The KJ Global headquarters was 20 minutes from the airport, and her contact had told her to take the connecting shuttle from Terminal 2. She moved fast, weaving through the current of travelers, her heels clicking a rhythm that kept time with her heartbeat. She had rehearsed her answers on the bus. She knew her numbers. She knew her market research. She was ready. She wasn't watching where she was going. The collision happened at the base of the escalator, her shoulder catching someone's arm, the paper cup tipping, and then the unmistakable catastrophe of hot coffee arcing through the air and landing, in full, across the front of a white dress shirt. Victoria stopped breathing. The man stood very still. He was tall, dressed simply, a black coat, white shirt, now increasingly not white, with the kind of face that gave nothing away. No anger, no dramatics. Just a long, measured pause, the way a person pauses when they are deciding what kind of moment this will be. "I'm so sorry." Victoria was already reaching into her bag. "I'm so sorry I wasn't. I'll pay for it. Please, let me." She pulled out the 2 bills. Her last 2 bills. She held them out with both hands, the way her mother had taught her to offer things. With respect, not apology. He looked at the money in her hands, then at her hands themselves, which were trembling. His eyes dropped briefly to the folder pressed to her chest, and she watched his gaze catch on the edge of paper sticking out. The hospital invoice, the red overdue stamp visible at the corner. She tucked it back in quickly. "It's fine," he said. His voice was even, quiet in a way that didn't feel like gentleness so much as discipline. "It's not fine. Your shirt. Keep your money." The words weren't cruel. They weren't kind, exactly. They landed somewhere in between with a weight that made her feel, for a moment, entirely seen. She hated it. "I can't afford another mistake today," she said, and she hadn't meant to say it. It came out before she could stop it, honest and raw and too much. And she watched something shift in his expression. Not softness, something more like attention. "Then go," he said. "You'll be late." She blinked. She hadn't told him anything about her schedule. Before she could ask, an airport staff member appeared at his elbow, bowing. "Director Kang, the car is ready." Victoria felt the ground tilt slightly. He was already turning away, but he paused, just once, just for a moment, and glanced back at the folder in her hands, at the KJ Global logo printed on the tab. "Good luck with your interview," he said, and then he was gone. KJ Global's headquarters occupied the top 7 floors of a glass tower in Gangnam, and the lobby smelled like money, the quiet, invisible kind that doesn't need to announce itself. Victoria arrived with 12 minutes to spare, which meant she had just enough time to notice the coffee stain that had transferred to her sleeve when she'd tried to help and to do absolutely nothing about it. She found the elevator and rode it up alone, watching her reflection in the polished doors. She looked composed. She had practiced composed. Underneath it, her mother's voice was playing on a loop. "You are Victoria. You were named for winning. Act like it." In the hallway outside the interview suite, 2 employees were talking in low voices, not quietly enough. "The director is conducting this one himself." "Su-Jin, really?" "Word is he's building a new analytics division. He wants to see who's worth the risk." "God help whoever's in that room." "He rejected 6 candidates last week. Didn't even finish reading the second one's file." Victoria squared her shoulders. She found the waiting area and sat. Her phone lit up with a new message from the hospital. She didn't open it. She couldn't afford to feel it right now. "Miss Okoye?" She looked up. The woman standing before her was impeccably assembled. A slate gray suit that probably cost more than Victoria's monthly rent. Hair pulled into a flawless chignon. A smile that was beautiful in the way that very sharp things can be beautiful. "I'm Seoul, Senior Executive Director. I'll be co-conducting your interview today." She said it like a sentence that meant something else. Her eyes moved over Victoria. The blazer, the borrowed shoes, the faint stain on the sleeve, and she smiled again, the same smile. "Lovely to meet you," Victoria said. Seoul tilted her head. "Let's go in, shall we?" The interview room was large and cold and arranged like a courtroom. A long table, 4 chairs on one side, 1 on the other. Victoria walked in and saw the man at the head of the table. Same black coat, same dark eyes, same absolute stillness, and across the front of his shirt, faint but undeniable, the ghost of a coffee stain. He hadn't changed. He looked at her as if he had expected this exact moment and found it neither surprising nor amusing, which somehow made it worse than if he'd smiled. "Miss Okoye," he said, "please sit." She sat. The next 40 minutes were not an interview. They were a dissection. 2 other executives asked standard questions that Seoul interrupted to reframe. Her methods were elegant. She never raised her voice, never said anything directly cruel. She simply rephrased things in ways that made Victoria's qualifications sound like apologies. "Your previous experience was primarily academic," Seoul said. "How do you reconcile theoretical preparation with the demands of a corporate environment?" "By working twice as hard as people who've had more practice," Victoria said. "That's admirable. But corporations need consistency, not effort born from desperation." The room went slightly still. "Or discipline," said Su-Jin. They all looked at him. He hadn't moved. His pen rested between 2 fingers, and his gaze was on the table in front of him, but his voice had been clear and quiet and final. "Effort born from necessity is still effort. The question is whether it translates to results." He looked up then, directly at Victoria. "Does it?" "Yes," she said. He held her gaze for exactly 2 seconds, then looked back at the table. "Good," he said. "Next question." When she walked out, Seoul caught up to her in the hallway. She wasn't even pretending at warmth now. She'd filed it away somewhere, that smile, put it in a drawer. "You were impressive in there," she said, "but I want to be candid with you. This role requires someone emotionally stable, someone who isn't carrying too much outside the office." Victoria looked at her. "She's unstable," Seoul said, not to Victoria. To the empty air, rehearsing, as if she were already saying it to Su-Jin later. Behind them, without either of them realizing he was there, Su-Jin had stepped out of the conference room. "She's under pressure," he said. "There's a difference." Seoul turned. Something moved across her face, quickly, and then it was gone. Su-Jin didn't look at either of them. He was already walking toward the elevator. The offer letter came at 9:47 that evening. Victoria was sitting on the floor of her apartment with her back against the bed because sitting on the floor felt honest in a way the chair didn't, and she read the email 4 times before she believed it. Then she transferred money to her mother's hospital, then to Tunda's tuition portal. Then she sat in the dark with her empty wallet and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not relief exactly. Relief was too soft for this. This was more like the moment after you've been holding your breath so long, your vision starts to blur and then you breathe and the world comes back into color. It hurt a little. Good things always hurt a little, she'd noticed. Coming back to life was not as gentle as it should have been. She was almost broke again by morning, but her mother would have dialysis and Tunda would have his semester. She went to sleep on the floor. Her first day at KJ Global was a quiet kind of war. The office was beautiful in the way that places are when they don't need to try. Clean lines, indirect lighting, people moving with the confidence of those who have never had to wonder whether they belong. They noticed her. She saw it in the half-second pauses, the recalibrations, the way a group of assistants fell quiet when she passed. She was tall and dark and Nigerian and new, and Seoul's corporate world had a specific template for belonging that she didn't fit, and she had known this before she came, and she had come anyway. She was assigned her desk. She was assigned her laptop. She was told by a soft-spoken HR coordinator named Ms. Park that she would be working directly under the executive director. Director Kang prefers to manage his division personally, Ms. Park said, with the careful voice of someone who had watched this process many times. He has high expectations. He's fair, but he doesn't repeat himself. Understood. He also doesn't make small talk. Even better. Ms. Park looked at her for a moment, then something almost like a smile crossed her face. A man appeared at Victoria's elbow, broad-shouldered, warm-faced, with the energy of someone who had never met a stranger. He stuck out his hand. Jiwoo. Kang Jiwoo, which makes things confusing, but we're cousins, not the same person. I handle business development. I also handle the part of this office that has a personality. Victoria shook his hand. Victoria Okoye. I know, the coffee woman. She stared at him. He grinned. Su-Jin didn't say anything. He never says anything, but he definitely knows who you are. He leaned slightly. He kept the shirt, by the way. Didn't send it out. He kept it. Didn't send it out. Jiwoo's expression was aggressively neutral. Anyway, welcome to KJ Global. Let me know if anyone makes you feel unwelcome. I have extensive experience causing trouble for people who deserve it. She met Su-Jin in the corridor at 8:14 a.m. on her third day. He was carrying a tablet and wearing his second most opaque expression, which she was beginning to understand was his version of accessible. He glanced at her, kept walking. Good morning, she said. He stopped. Prepared people, he said without turning around. Don't spill coffee on strangers. She adjusted her folders. Prepared men don't hide the fact that they own the building. He turned. His expression hadn't changed, quite, but there was something at the corner of it, something restrained, like a word he'd decided not to say. 7 minutes, he said instead. Staff briefing. I know, she said. I was already heading there. He looked at her for one more second. Then he turned and walked on. She was almost certain, not completely certain, but almost, that the corner of his mouth had moved. Seoul-rin's first real volley came on Thursday. She appeared at Victoria's desk at 4:30 p.m. with a file and a smile that didn't reach anything above her cheekbones. The director needs a full investor sentiment analysis for the Q3 review, cross-referenced with the APAC market shifts from the last 8 quarters. He needs it by end of tomorrow. Victoria looked at the file. The request. Inside, it represented approximately 60 hours of work. That's not enough time, she said. No, Seoul-rin agreed pleasantly. It's not. There was a pause. Neither is my life, Victoria said. So, she picked up the file. She was still at her desk at 2 a.m. when she felt herself losing the battle with consciousness. She put her head down for what she told herself was 5 minutes, and her screen was still glowing when she slipped under, and when she surfaced again, it was 2:47, and the office was dark and silent. A takeout container was on the corner of her desk. Soft tofu stew, still warm. No note, no explanation. She looked at it for a long time. Then she ate, quietly, in the empty office, and went back to work. She delivered the analysis at 8:55 a.m. the next morning before the briefing, and she did it by walking into the conference room and placing it on the table in front of Su-Jin without ceremony. He picked it up, didn't say anything for a long moment. Seoul-rin was watching from across the room with an expression that was working very hard to be composed. Good, Su-Jin said. It was one word. It shouldn't have felt the way it felt, but it landed like the first warm thing in a cold room, and she carried it with her for the rest of the day without quite admitting that she was doing it. The investor dinner happened on a Tuesday. Seoul-rin delivered the invitation with the kind of casual timing that Victoria would only understand later. 3 hours before the event, phrased as a request from the director, mentioning that it was semi-formal, without mentioning that semi-formal at KJ Global meant structured gowns and 300,000 won handbags. Victoria arrived in her best dress. It was a deep red wrap dress, elegant in a way that worked on most occasions and was simply not this occasion. She understood the moment she walked into the ballroom. The chandeliers, the champagne stations, the way every woman's outfit cost more than her monthly salary. She walked in anyway. The whispers were soft enough that she could pretend not to hear them. She found her place card and sat and opened the folder at her seat and felt something go cold in her chest. The investor packet, the one she'd spent 2 days preparing, the one she'd sent to the print team, was wrong. Not updated wrong, sabotaged wrong, numbers transposed, a competitor's figures inserted where KJ's should have been, an entire section missing. The lead investor, a silver-haired man named Mr. Choi, was already looking at it. "Miss Okoye," he said, "these projections don't match what Director Kang presented last quarter." Every face at the table turned. She looked at the packet, then looked up. "You're right," she said. "They don't." From across the table, Seo-rin's expression was a masterpiece of concerned sympathy. Su-Jin was standing near the entrance. She hadn't seen him come in. He was looking at the table with the particular focus of someone who was calculating several things at once. He moved to the table and picked up the investor packet without sitting down. He read it for 45 seconds. She counted. And then he set it down. "This packet wasn't prepared by Miss Okoye," he said. His voice was even and carried without effort. "The version she submitted was correct. This has been altered." He didn't look at Seo-rin. He didn't need to. "We'll use the digital version." He opened his tablet and passed it to Mr. Choi. Then he looked at Victoria. "Sit beside me," he said. The room held its breath. She picked up her place card and moved it. She sat. Across the table, Chairwoman Kang Su-Jin, whom Victoria hadn't noticed until this exact moment, was watching with the expression of someone filing everything away for later. Afterward, in the corridor outside, with the dinner murmur fading behind glass doors, Victoria stood with her arms folded and her chin up and waited until she was sure her voice would be steady. Su-Jin stopped beside her. "Why?" she asked. He looked at the middle distance. "Because you were right. The packet was correct." "That's not what I mean." A pause. "I know," he said. She was about to say something else when her phone rang. She glanced down on instinct, Lagos area code, and her whole body changed. The composure, the carefully maintained architecture of her, it cracked open. "I have to take it." She stepped away. He watched her go. He watched the way she pressed the phone to her ear and turned toward the wall, the way her free hand gripped the strap of her bag like an anchor. He didn't look away. It was her mother, not the doctor. Her mother, which was rarer and always meant something. "Victoria," her mother's voice was thin, thinner than last time. "Mama? What happened?" The nurse said. "I collapsed. They stabilized me, but the main treatment—" A breath. "Victoria, I don't want you to worry. I don't want you spending anything you don't have." She pressed her forehead against the wall. "Mama," she said, "don't do that." "Do what?" "Protect me. It's my turn to protect you." There was a silence. Then her mother said quietly, "You sound tired, my daughter." "I'm fine." "You sound like me, when I was carrying everything." Behind her, she heard Su-Jin's footsteps approach and then stop. She turned. He was standing a few feet away with his phone at his side, and he was looking at her with that expression that gave nothing away and somehow gave everything away simultaneously. "How much?" he said quietly. She pulled the phone slightly from her ear. "No." "Victoria." It was the first time he'd used her name. She looked at him. He looked at her. In the dim corridor, with the chandelier light from the ballroom falling through the glass, he looked, not softer exactly, but less armored, like the discipline he wore had developed a small, specific crack. "I'm arranging transport," he said. "Tonight." The private jet was too much. She said this 4 times. He didn't respond to any of them. Seo-rin found out the same night. She heard it from the flight coordinator, a small, unnecessary detail that found her anyway. The way unnecessary details always find the people who are listening for them. A private jet. Lagos, arranged personally by Director Kang. Departure. Tonight. She stood in the corridor outside her office for a moment, very still, the way she was still when something required calculation. Then she took out her phone. "Chairwoman Kang." Her voice was even, composed. The voice of someone who had practiced delivering information without appearing to enjoy it. "There's something you should know. Su-Jin arranged a private flight tonight. For the new hire." A pause. He crossed a line for her. On the other end, the chairwoman said nothing for several seconds. "I see," she said finally. The call ended. She sat in a seat that was wider than her apartment bed, over the South China Sea, and watched Su-Jin work across the aisle from her, reading something, always reading something, and thought about the way control looked when it was chosen instead of inherited. "Back home," she said, "everyone thinks leaving means you've made it." She wasn't sure why she was saying it. They don't see what it costs. They see the scholarship and the Seoul address. They don't see the... She paused. Never mind. He looked up from his tablet. "They don't see the receipts," she finished. He was quiet for a moment. "No, they wouldn't." She pulled her knees up. "You didn't have to do this." "I know." "Then why?" He considered this with the thoroughness he brought to everything. Because watching someone carry everything alone and never ask for help is... He stopped, set down the tablet. "You're not angry," he said, which was not what she'd expected him to say. She blinked. "Most people in your position," he said, "would be angry." "I used to be," she said. "Then I realized anger was expensive. I couldn't afford to waste the energy." He looked at her for a long time, long enough that she became aware of the specific quality of his attention, the way he noticed things without performing the noticing. "You're not cold either," she said. "You're hurt. There's a difference." She said it the way he had said there's a difference in the interview room. Not as an accusation, as a simple fact offered without cruelty. Something happened in his expression. It was quick, and then it was sealed away. But she caught it. The half-second when Kang Su-Jin, executive director, did not know what to do with being seen. Lagos was loud and warm and smelled like her childhood. Su-Jin stood slightly apart in the hospital corridor, watching Victoria navigate the nurses and paperwork and family with an ease that she did not have in Seoul. Here she was not composing herself. She was simply herself, the full-volume version, laughing with her brother when he called, pressing her forehead to her mother's hand. Her mother was small in the hospital bed, but her eyes were the same as the photograph. She looked at Su-Jin, standing in the doorway, and her gaze was slow and deliberate. "Come," she said. He came. "Thank you," she said in English, looking at him directly. "Please don't," he said, which was as close to embarrassed as Victoria had ever seen him. Her mother smiled. She looked at Victoria for a moment, then back at him. "That man," she said quietly, in Yoruba, when he stepped out to take a call. "He looks at you like he's trying not to." Victoria did not respond, but she looked at the doorway where he'd been standing, and she did not deny it. The rain came that evening. It came the way Lagos rain comes, suddenly and completely like a decision. They were on the hospital's covered veranda, watching it. The city dissolved into sound and gray. "My ex-fiancé," he said, just like that, without preamble, as if he'd been deciding for a while and finally stopped. She waited. "She used me for 3 years, specifically for the share allocation that came with a Kang family engagement. When she had what she needed, she made sure the dissolution was public." He said it clinically, as if describing someone else's life. "She cried at the press conference, said I was cold, controlling, that I never really let her in." Victoria watched the rain. "Were they right?" He was quiet for a moment. "Probably." "So you got more controlled." It seemed logical. It wasn't. He turned to look at her. She was looking at the rain. "Control is just fear wearing a good suit," she said. "I know because I do it too. Every time I say I'm fine when I'm not. Every time I say don't worry to my brother." She paused. "We're both just trying to hold the walls up so nobody sees the structure cracking." The rain came harder. He was very close to her now. She didn't remember that happening. It had occurred in the small increments of a long evening, his shoulder almost touching hers, his breath visible in the humid air. "Victoria." She turned. His face was closer than she'd registered, and the distance between them was the kind of distance that had weight, that meant something, that asked something. And she felt herself leaning infinitesimally forward, and she watched him notice it, and she watched him decide. Her phone rang. They both stopped. She pulled it out with a hand that was not quite steady, stared at the number for a moment. "I should..." "Yes." He stepped back, looked at the rain. She answered. The call was Tunde, calling to say thank you, calling to say he'd heard their mother was stable, calling to say the way Victoria always said everything was fine when it wasn't was driving him crazy and he loved her and she needed to stop. She told him she was fine. He said, "Of course you did." She almost laughed. When she came back, Su-Jin was still watching the rain. She stood beside him. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. But the distance between them had changed. It held something now, something that hadn't been named but had been acknowledged, and that was enough. For now, that was enough. The summons from Chairwoman Kang came on a Wednesday morning, delivered by a black car to Victoria's Seoul apartment. The chairwoman's private office was designed to make you feel small. It succeeded. She was seated when Victoria arrived, and she gestured to the chair across from her desk with the precision of someone who had decided everything already. "You're perceptive," she said. No greeting. "That's clear. And you're resilient. Also clear." She set her hands flat on the desk. "But you are a distraction, not a future." Victoria held very still. "I know about your mother's treatment, your brother's tuition, the old debt." The chairwoman slid an envelope across the desk. "This covers all of it. All of it, Miss Okoye, with enough remaining that you never have to hold your breath over a hospital receipt again." Victoria looked at the envelope. "And in return, you resign, quietly, today." A pause. "Su-Jin will be disappointed for a short time. He'll survive it. He always does. But if you stay, this becomes complicated in ways that damage everyone, including him." She let that land. "You understand his position, his obligations. Is this a threat?" "It's a business arrangement." The chairwoman looked at her calmly. "You know about those." Victoria was gone by 3 p.m. Her desk was cleared. Her badge was returned. She sent one message. "Thank you for the opportunity. I've resigned for personal reasons. Please don't ask." She didn't send it to Su-Jin. She sent it to HR. She transferred the money to her mother's hospital within the hour. Sent the rest to Tunde's account. Paid the last outstanding debt. The one that had been her father's first, then hers. She sat on her bed and looked at her phone and thought, this is what it costs to be loved by someone you can't keep. She bought a plane ticket back to Lagos for Friday. Su-Jin found out on Thursday. He came to her desk and found it empty. He stood there for longer than he should have. Then he called HR, who told him it was personal. Then he called her number, which rang and went to voicemail. Then he stood at the window of his office for 11 minutes, looking at the city, recalculating. He had been wrong about the situation before. He understood the shape of being used. He told himself he believed, that he could recognize it. The money, he thought. She saw the exit and she took it. His mother had offered. He knew his mother's methods. He assumed the rest. He didn't sleep. Jiwoo found him in the office at 7 a.m. on Friday. "She didn't take the money," Jiwoo said. He set a document on the desk. A bank transfer confirmation, a resignation letter, a message from the hospital in Lagos confirming payment received. She used it. Every one. For her mother, for her brother, for a debt that wasn't even hers. He sat down without being invited. "She didn't sell you. She saved them." Su-Jin looked at the documents. "She knew staying would cost you something," Jiwoo said. She decided to absorb the cost herself. A pause. "That's not someone running away. That's someone who loves the people they can't keep." Su-Jin was already on his feet. "The shareholders' event," Jiwoo said. "I know. She's supposed to be at the airport in 2 hours." "I know." "Su-Jin." He stopped at the door. "Don't be cold about this," Jiwoo said. "Please, just this once." The shareholders' event was KJ Global's largest annual gathering. Board members, investors, press, the full performance of institutional confidence. Su-Jin arrived and moved through it with his usual precision, greeting the right people, saying the right things, until he saw her. Victoria was crossing the lobby. She was dressed simply, nothing like the investor dinner, nothing borrowed or mismatched. Just herself, moving with purpose toward the reception desk, an envelope in her hand. She was returning the remaining money. Of course she was. He moved through the crowd without stopping. He reached her as she was setting the envelope on the counter. She looked up and saw him, and her face did something complicated. It steadied, which meant she'd been bracing for this, and it broke slightly, which meant the steadying cost her. "Su-Jin." "Why?" he said, not angry, just needing to know. She looked at him. Around them, the lobby was full. Investors, board members, his mother standing 20 feet away with the expression of someone watching a fire they started. "Because staying costs too much," Victoria said. "Not for me. For you, your position, your family's. Let it cost me." She stopped. "Let it cost me," he said again. His voice was the same even register it always was, but there was something underneath it now, something that hadn't been there before, something that had been building since an airport corridor and a coffee stain and a hospital invoice and a Lagos veranda in the rain. He turned. The room was quiet in the way that rooms go quiet when something real is happening in them. Seo Rin was standing near the entrance, flawless and still. Seo Rin. He said it simply with finality, in front of all of them. No. She looked at him. Whatever has been assumed about us, whatever has been arranged, no. Across the lobby, his mother's expression did not change, but her stillness changed its quality. He held her gaze for a moment. When he spoke, it was quiet. Not for the room, but the room heard it anyway. You taught me loyalty, he said. She taught me what it costs. He turned back to Victoria. She was looking at him with the expression of someone who had prepared for every version of this except the true one. You carried everything, he said quietly. Let someone stand with you. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, very softly, You're going to make this very complicated. Yes, he said. Your mother will adapt. The board will follow. She looked at him. He looked at her. In the middle of everything, the investors, the press, the marble lobby, the weight of his name and her debt and all the distances they'd crossed to be standing here, she exhaled. And she stayed. The weeks that followed were neither simple nor uncomplicated, because real things never are. There were conversations with the chairwoman that lasted long enough to be exhausting and ended without resolution, which was its own kind of resolution. There were board members who had opinions. There were colleagues who watched and whispered and gradually found something else to whisper about. Seo Rin transferred to the Tokyo division. Jiwoo celebrated this privately and excessively. Victoria returned to KJ Global on a Tuesday, permanent this time, with a different title, one that reflected the work she'd been doing all along, now acknowledged in writing. She walked through the lobby with her badge back around her neck and took the elevator to the 6th floor. Su-Jin was waiting at the elevator doors. He was holding 2 coffees. She looked at him. He looked at her. Something passed between them that was the full accumulation of airport corridors and interview rooms and late nights and Lagos rain and lobby declarations and all the quiet moments in between where 2 people learn the specific shape of each other. He held out a cup. Try not to spill this one, he said. She took it. No promises, she said. And Kang Su-Jin, restrained, disciplined, emotionally controlled Kang Su-Jin, smiled, for the first time, fully. Thank you for staying till the end. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves a good story. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'd love to know. Until the next story, take care.